This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome, everyone, to the next perfect step, where all possibilities lie in conversation. I'm your co-host, Laurie Mullen.
I'm your co-host, Laurie Tremblay.
And I'm also your co-host, Kim McStay. And I have the pleasure today to introduce one of my favorite people. I have gotten to know her over years and years and seen a lot of changes and just very, very intrigued with her whole backstory and what her gifts are and how she shares them with the world. So with no further ado, I will let her explain to you what it is that she does. And Raecine Ardis, I will leave it to you.
Thank you. So I really identify as a priestess, and I bring a shamanic healing component to psychic medium work. So I work with community and also individually, helping others to connect to the spirit guide energies, deceased loved ones, deity that they may be walking with, and bringing that energetic component in to also offer healing for their journeys. And I marry that to the shamanic structure, but also a lot of occult symbolism and pagan path working, so that in session we can access multi-dimensions and get to know ourselves and why we've chosen to incarnate at a deeper level. So that's the work that I've done. I've been doing it professionally for probably over 15 years now, but I've been talking to entities and energies my whole life. So that's my spiel.
One thing I did want to add to the questions with you is you have a very colorful past, and a really interesting story as to how you got here. So I would love to hear more about that.
Yes. So I was raised in basically a religious cult. I was raised by a very strict strain of Jehovah's Witnesses. So everything that I do now for work is considered of the devil and pure evil with how I was raised. So very, very strict religious environment. But I grew, I should say, with a lot of patriarchal conditioning as well. But this was also, within that, I was raised out in the woods, in the forest. And so I really feel like the energies I was able to connect with from that space were able to assist me to find the strength to leave the cult energy that is very difficult for most people to actually make a shift out of. And so I do find in a lot of my work, I connect with people who have serious religious trauma because of that. And my mother was also a very gifted artist before my parents joined the religion. So I had a few years that were rife with art and myth and symbolism. And that had a big impact on my psyche as a little one. So does that give a little bit more, Kim?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Would one of you Lauries like to ask her a question?
Yeah, so you talked about working with deities. What is your favorite, or what is the one that you like to work with the most? And why would somebody want, who doesn't know anything about it, what are the benefits that they could get from working with deities?
Oh, that's a great question, Laurie. So I primarily work with Isis. I bring in a little bit of connection with Venus, but it's primarily Isis. And her energy as a mother goddess was extremely healing for me when I was coming out of the religious conditioning. And so for me, being able to communicate with her and work with her as a specific form of deity, as a divine essence, if you will, was very helpful to reformulate from more of a masculine Christian idea of deity. So that was very healing for me. It was very encouraging for me to engage not only in critical thinking, but also to explore my spiritual gifts and to see them as gifts, not as something evil. So working with her was deeply healing for me, profoundly healing for for my body, my mind, and my spirit. And I would say for people who are looking to understand their gifts, deepen into spirituality, and also deal with perhaps trauma or some form of abuse that they might have dealt with in their childhood, deity work, and working with devas of place or spirits of the land can be very helpful to rebuild connections with our body and our soul. So it's eye-opening, and when done as a relationship, it becomes very personal. It becomes something that's very alive. It's not something you visit every once in a while, but it's a lived practice, and that can be very fulfilling and also comforting on our journeys as humans. So I would say that would be a primary recommendation for working with deity. And I also do believe from all of my years of work that we do have, I like to call them spirit tribes. We have specific energies that walk with us for our journeys. And so connecting consciously with them can help us to step out of patterns we might be tending to repeat and embrace living authentically.
That's great. So I have a question. How would you say that it would be good to connect with your deities, and how would you do that? And I know the spirit of the land is so important too.
Yep.
Healing in the forest is very important. So what would be some tips that you might give, like, for people that would want to connect with your spirit tribe and your deities?
So I would say, first of all, I would encourage you to first of all explore how you are feeling connection to the divine. So for some of us, that's a visual thing. For some of us, it is more of a feeling space. For some of us, it's knowing. And then following that prompting. So maybe we're suddenly feeling interested in a certain time period in humanity, or a specific set of myths, a certain lineage we might be called to. Exploring deity within that is one recommendation I would give. Another thing I found very helpful in what I'm predominantly known for publicly is working with spiritual tools like tarot, any form of augury or divination. So a pendulum, you can use runes, and that's a way of building communication with that deity and guide. So that's a form of, you can ask a question, draw a card. You can ask a question, work with that spiritual tool. It helps to build that intuitive muscle. And then as time goes by, it does become something that's a constant communication, if you will. So you can tap into that, into those guides, into that deity work very easily by building that muscle. But I would definitely say feeling into what's calling you, what you feel interested in, what you might feel passionate about, what sparks your interest, and then working with some form of spiritual tool. And while I prefer to work with cards because I happen to like artwork and occult symbolism, you can work with anything that calls to you. And I really do encourage working with something that is exciting for you, not something you're fighting against, to build that relationship. And then the other thing I would just add, in addition to connecting with our intuitive muscle, is not expecting the communication from deity to sound like a different voice when we begin hearing it, but that many times I always say it's almost like a voice that is very similar to mine, but it's softer and it feels older to me. It feels clear, but it's a soft voice that might be in my tonality. So it doesn't sound like a booming voice coming from outside, but it's something that we're experiencing within. So I would just say, if you are beginning this journey, it's not going to look like a vision coming out of the sky. It's going to be more gentle and build over time. The more attention you bring to it, the clearer it will get for you.
Thank you. And I also, from my experience, I know that the voice is loving, and so you don't want to, if you're thinking or thinking that you're hearing some negative message, that's probably not the one that you should listen to.
Very much so. And I am someone who feels like there are some energies we don't need to talk to. So I always like to offer, we can always say no. We have free will. We don't have to engage with something just because it knocks on the door. So very much so, Laurie, yes.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and just to piggyback off that, like what you said is, yeah, I come from a very Catholic religion, and so, right, this is, the voice of evil or whatever. But in my journey, I've come to realize the deities, the guides, angels, that I look at them almost like a human teacher, right? It's the same type of thing. I'm not giving my power away to them and just doing whatever they say, but yet they're loving guides. And that's kind of why we call them guides. They're like teachers. They're there to help and support us and love us, to teach us kind of those things that, the unconditional love we're really not taught as humans. And it really comes without conditions. But yet I look at them like I would a teacher here on earth in human form. So it kind of took that away from me, that question and doubt, when working with them.
Yes. Yeah, that is so powerful and so true. And I also find as well, and Kim and I have talked about this a lot, that our guides will very much help us in dealing with aspects of shame too, which tend to be something if you are female in body, or if you've had an experience of being female, we can tend to carry a lot of that even within our ancestral DNA. And so, like you were saying, those guides are here to sometimes show us where we might not even be understanding that we're operating under that grid, but that we can release that through self-love. And self-love is a very big component of, I think, a lot of why those of us who are here at this time are here.
Yeah, it's a powerful, the self-love thing is something I think we all have, had to deal with for, centuries, really. But, I think this lifetime, some of us are really figuring it out and getting it, and hopefully that will help in the future. You had mentioned, kind of a tribe with the deities that you work with, and do you find like a similarity to the ones that seem to go together, or, I mean, is that a steady thing or is it random?
So, that's a good question. I would say, let me know if I'm answering this in full, Kim, but the way that I experience it in working with others is we kind of have like a core set of guides. And some of them may be from, let's say, a similar pantheon or time period historically. So we have this kind of core set that are always with us, but then I often find we'll have specific energies that come in for specific chapters in our story. And so they might be here. I'll go back to that word shame. Like there might be a specific guide that comes forward that's here primarily to help you with this aspect of shame or love or compassion. And so those guides might come in and out, if you will, and may not be associated with those core, like lifelong guides, but they're very much present to help us with specific reason. And the way that I experience that type of energy is typically with spirit animal guides. I find that animal guides will come forward for a very specific reason, and then they might shift out. So there's kind of like a core layer, and then there's energy that's moving and may come in for a time and then step back out. Did I understand that question right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. No, and I also find your path very interesting because you're also a single mother. And, can you talk to us a little bit about the trials and tribulations that has caused with, I'm kind of digging deep, sorry.
Well, I think a really big part of the journey of being a single parent, and specifically a single mother to a son, is it just shows you with such clarity that we all make mistakes. So it gives a lot of opportunity to have forgiveness for our parents, but also that we're really fostering an energy that is not us. It's someone, they're their own soul. And so how do we foster that and not in some way stop that light from shining, I would say, is something that I have really tried to work hard to encourage. My son's name is Vincent, for him to discover who he is and have the freedom to explore what calls to him. And then I would say the other biggest part that I tend to struggle with at times is just having time for yourself, or being able to also have time for your own practice and still trying to be the best parent that you can be as well. So there's a lot of push and pull with maybe themes around, what is selfishness, what is self-care, how do I advocate for my child but also give them the freedom to experience those lessons that can hurt, and be able to process that and communicate honestly. And even when you're absolutely exhausted, make that time, if they need to talk, to sit and talk and be with them. So I would say those are some big components that I struggle to find a balance with. But when you do feel that you're dialed in and you've done it to the best of your ability, there's no better feeling than that. So, right? Yeah. So that's been very much what's come up for me as far as tribulation, or like, where is the balance to find with that? And the other thing I would say is that my son is very intuitive as well. And so because he is so intuitive, I've had to deal with a lot of my own trauma in order to model for him how he can work with his gifts and not feel debilitated by them in his life. So that's something else that is I'm always trying to find a balance with that.
Yeah. And that, I mean, lucky for him that you're able to, let him express those gifts and kind of guide him through some of that. So that's a pretty big gift to give to your son. That's great.
Thank you, Kim. It's exciting to see what happens when the gifts aren't shut off.
Yeah.
For so many of us through our childhood experiences, we hit that age where we had to either hide it or it had to turn off in order to survive. And so to see what happens for a child when they don't have to shut it off at a certain age is really exciting.
That is, and I think we all can share in that.
Yeah.
That we've all had to be shut off at one point, and
yes,
it takes a little bit to reopen.
Yes, it does.
I think that's wonderful about this time, is that we aren't making it, we're making it the normal instead. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing, explore it. Like, we're making it a safe space for them at this point. Because of us doing the work on our own traumas and stuff and going through it. And we're all mothers here, excuse me. And I think that we've taken on a lot from Ancestral, from our society, from growing up, but I felt that a lot of my shame, blame, and guilt all came when I had my children, my two boys. You feel guilty working, you feel guilty not working, you feel there's just so much, because we love these children so much and we want the best for them. But yet I think that we're coming to terms where our job as parents is to help teach them what unconditional love really looks like. And to stop trying to control them, to keep them safe, but to allow the space for them to make mistakes, and then tell them that it doesn't define them, right? And that they're allowed to make mistakes. They haven't ruined their lives. It doesn't make them who they are. And I love it for the children nowadays that we're doing the work, that hopefully we don't continue to repeat these cycles and processes, that we give these children the space to know that mistakes are okay, and that it doesn't define them, and that they're loved no matter what. That we hold this space for them to be able to make a mistake, and that there's somebody who will still love them, that love isn't kept from you unless you live the way we want you to live. And I think that's exciting for the kids, and it's exciting for us that we've done this work to be able to hold that space for them.
Agreed. And it's exciting to think of what they're going to do as they become adults too, and what, how they will assist in the shift that's happening here is very exciting to think about, for sure. And to be a part of, like you said, because we're doing our work in order to hold a different space for them.
And yet they are our beautiful teachers too. Like my sons teach me so much. So they're just as strong and beautiful, teaching us so much about ourselves.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. And I think, something I come up with a lot in one-on-one client session work, just to go back to that idea of lessons, like you were saying, Laurie, is a lot of times in session, a client might say to me, because usually people are coming either for a tarot reading or a mediumship reading if they're having a one-on-one session. And they'll say, I thought I was making the right choice and this didn't happen. I must have done something wrong, or my manifestation didn't work. But sometimes in this realm of contrast, we learn a great deal from those lessons, and instead of looking at it as a punishment, to see that it's an opportunity for growth really reframes our stories. And so, like you were saying, to offer that to our children, that you can make a mistake, you can fail at something might not work out, but that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you as a core being. Yeah. So that's an exciting, like you were saying, it's exciting for us to embrace that as parents, but also for us as individual people on our journeys, that those lessons that we come into contact with, it's not always because we failed at something or we are messed up or wrong within ourselves, but that we're growing in a new way. Yeah.
And to be able to show them the silver lining, because sometimes the things that you manifest, you might not manifest them in the way that you think that they should come to you. But when they come to you in a different way, that, and you think, oh no, what have I done? I've done it wrong. And then you realize there's always a silver lining or another twist. And if you can give that gift to your kids to let them know that, just hold on, just wait, because there's probably something a whole lot better that, you didn't even think of that is going to come your way because of that,
Yes.
that process. And that's something I was never taught. So that's exciting.
It is exciting.
I love this conversation. And also I had a question for you, Raecine, about the shamanic work that you do, and you do work with ancestors.
I do. And I found over the last year or so that ancestral work has really taken on a past life component as well. So I trained for 2 years with Laurie Levity, and she was a shamanic teacher. She was based in New Hampshire when I studied with her, but she had been all over before she passed, as far as, across states, and she's worked with many people. And that shamanic training really brought in the aliveness of the land and working with the land as part of who we are and as sharing relationship with us. And so when it comes to the ancestral work component, tapping into the land through ley lines can be very effective in tapping into certain storylines that may be repeated either in our physical DNA, like ancestrally, or in our energetic DNA. So I like to call that energetic DNA might be more the essence of what we've worked with as a soul across many lifetimes. And that may be separate than the physical ancestral DNA for this particular family line. So the ancestral work gives us an opportunity to bring healing to a core repeating wound that's possibly repeated through our physical family, hundreds and thousands of years, but then also that energetic component of storylines or groups of souls that we may have incarnated with. And the ancestral work around that has a lot to do with understanding the core wound and then working through presence to offer healing to the right degree at that time. I always like to say that because knocking the door off of something isn't always the most helpful way to offer healing. So it's always the appropriate amount for that time, but to bring healing to that wound and then offering the understanding of the space of where we're at to feel empowered to move forward in a new way. So that ancestral component, I would say, applies in the physical DNA, but also energetically too. And the shamanic work is very, gosh, there's nothing like bringing the elements and earth into that type of healing journey. So it's very profound. It deeply offered great levels of healing for me personally. And it's always a joy to be able to bring it into client or community work for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I like
Thank
the
you.
community work idea too. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Because I always find, and I'm sure you all will agree too, that there's often like a theme when a group of people gather in whatever form of community it is. I always find there's like, so I do online Sabbath observances, which from a witchcraft perspective is observing the seasons on the wheel of the year. So we always have like a larger community theme, but then there's often a more finite theme will emerge for that particular observance. So we're working on those multiple layers there with those themes within community. And so I think there's always a reason why a certain group of people gather at a certain specific time.
Yeah, I agree. When you work with large groups, there's always usually an energy, like even though it's set for a certain thing, a theme, that there is always that one underlining energy that everybody comes with. There's a relatable thing that everybody sitting there is either going through or has experienced, or there's an underlining energy that everybody is connected to.
Yes,
Which brings the whole thing together for everybody.
very much so. Very much so. And sometimes when we're holding space for that, before you step into the circle or before you step into that work, you can have an idea of what that is. But then sometimes when you're holding that space, you just have to go in a whole different direction than you thought you were going to be going for that day. And I always think that's a really magical part of getting to hold space in that way, because you can't control some aspects of that. You have to go with what is coming forward for the group. Yeah.
So true. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat. Yeah. So do you have like a favorite type of work that you work with? Just like with the shamanic or with your online workshops, and like, do you have a favorite, or they all have their special place?
Oh, that's such a good question, Kim. I really love the shamanic work, and channeling within the shamanic work, I would say, is my absolute favorite work to do. But I do love working with the structure of tarot because it does have a loose structure, and there's something about having something tangible in front of a client or a group of people that in some way sometimes allows people to feel a little more relaxed. Like they know, oh, we're going to do tarot now. So they'll kind of exhale a little bit. And that can be quite fulfilling as well, to be able to look at the cards, but it's really channeling and tell someone back their story and have them really feel seen, and that opening up new possibilities for them. There's no drug quite like that. So I would say it's always a toss up between the shamanic work and channeling and that type of experience, because there's just nothing like that. Again, you can't control that. You can't make it up when it happens. It just feels like such a beautiful experience to be able to witness.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you're also a medium too, so you do that type of channeling as well.
Yes. It's the thing I'm probably most reticent to do. I mean, I was kind of forced kicking and screaming to do it. In a large part because of how I was raised. The witnesses don't believe that you have a soul. And so there's like perhaps an unconscious component around talking to another soul that's been human, that has a message for someone. But I think it's really proven to me the truth of the work, because I didn't want to do it and it happens anyhow. Like there's no, yeah. So for me, that's really proven personally for me over time, like this is real and this is a real path and it's safe for you to follow it, because there's no way for me to know when someone I have never met before sits down in front of me and I share something, not I, but what comes through gets shared. That's so personal. Like you can't,
You can't come up with that.
you can't
Yeah,
culture.
do you see the soul, or do you hear, or like how is your intake of that? How does that show up for you?
It's kind of multi-layered. The first thing that happens when I step into mediumship style work is I kind of see all of us as having like a holographic blueprint. And so when I'm going into session, I'm kind of moving into someone else's blueprint with their permission, of course. I don't do that without people's permission. But as you move into that space, then there'll be like little areas that will light up visually for me. And so I'll, with my third eye, kind of tap into that light. And from there, if it's a medium reading specifically, I'll ask for something to help me know who that deceased individual is. And then once we've identified who it is for the client, that's my favorite part because the messages come through as hearing and feeling. So oftentimes I'll get just as emotional as the client and we'll both be crying because one thing I have really noticed, especially for individuals who've crossed over, who have messages, is the amount of love on the other side it's like an ocean of love. It's unending. And so when you tap into that, it makes you cry, not from a space of sadness necessarily, just from the beauty of love. So I lost where we were, Kim. What thinking about that. So that's what we were saying. That's primarily how
you see it all, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we have that blueprint and then there are lights I'll move into. And from there, the other senses come in.
That's pretty wild. That's great. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Such a beautiful description.
Oh,
yeah.
It really kind of made me cry.
Yeah. It's very, I've never had I will say this, kind of to go back to what Laurie had brought up at the beginning with free will. There have been a few times over the years where I'll stop a session and say, I'm not going to channel this energy that's coming through. But overwhelmingly, it's that level of love that comes through, even if there's been real wounding in, let's say, a family dynamic, and that soul is coming through asking forgiveness. There's always a deep level of love that's accessed in the session work, because that's the primary reason why they're coming forward with a message. It's to offer healing and love. And any other time when it's not in alignment with that, it doesn't feel right. So it's very easy to say, nope, disconnecting, not going to go there. Yeah.
Wow.
And in all your work and the time that you're going through, do you see a theme right now on what people are struggling with and what might the advice be to help people work through that?
Yes, there's very much a theme at this time around, at least in the clients and community that are coming forward to me, feeling very stuck and trying to access the reason why they're here as a soul at this time. It's very interesting because it seems to be almost like every couple years it will kind of shift. But what I've noticed predominantly since around last summer is a sense of, I feel so stagnant and I don't know why, and I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Can you help? And I would say, if you're watching or listening to this podcast, I would encourage you to really be present with yourself first and foremost. If you're feeling stuck, I found that what's been very helpful for me, and Kim and I have talked about this too, is journaling, just to access the emotions of what's there for you. From that space, tapping into work with the divine, whether you see them as deity or guides like we're talking about today, or another type of energy, but working with that energy to help you remember your light. And then from that place, you can make changes in the physical reality. But I've always found, at least for myself and what's come through predominantly in client work as advice, is let's be present with who we are and where we're at now. So let's get in touch with our emotions. Let's understand that. And from that place, let's start opening to connection with the spiritual, and then opening up to fulfillment and our light.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I agree with you. I feel like right now that presence is such an important thing, is to be present right now. And I think a big theme is trying to find that joy and love for ourselves in that place. And we don't know how to do that. And I think a lot of that stagnation and stuckness is because we don't know how to follow our joy. And to even figure out what makes us that joyful. I mean, we have joyful moments, but does any of us really know how to sit in that energy of joy, and to learning how to do that? And I think, you talked about life purpose, right? And I think that we're going into something, this new energy and this new amount of light that we don't know what it looks like. So we don't know where we're moving forward. But yet we know something has to be more than what is happening right now on Earth, right? This whole tower moment that's happening for us as a collective. And it does feel stuck and heavy. And we don't know because it's new, because I think we're moving to a space that we've never been in before. And so it's that unknown. So we don't know what direction to go in. And I think that goes along with what you're saying, that we feel stuck and stagnant because we don't know yet what that new energy looks like. And so that brings out these feelings for us. But I'm also excited where we're headed. So, yeah. So,
yeah, I think even though I do understand there's so much uncertainty in the world and it can feel very scary, I too feel like the shift is in a completely new direction. So it's good. It's like with you mentioning the tower too, Laurie, which in the structure of tarot, there's the tower, but then there's the star, right? It's like we're moving somewhere better, or somewhere that's going to be more in alignment and fulfilling, but we don't know how we're getting there right now. And that's why I think that presence piece is so important.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
Yep. But it can feel hard not to scrabble, to say like, well, I've been told my whole life that this is supposed to be what life is about. And so it makes perfect sense why sometimes we are, especially in client work, I'll find like trying to go back to things that worked in the past. And yet we're being shown by the universe, or whatever you would like to call that energy, that isn't working. So hence the stuck energy, because turning back to what we were doing is not giving us that sense of fulfillment.
Yeah,
totally
absolutely. Yeah. And the erratic emotions that arise from that, don't even feel like you half the time. I mean, I've been really struggling with anger, just bursting out of nowhere, and then trying to figure out how do you, channel all of that into the right pathway so that you are still in a positive state of mind and presence to be able to, guide yourself through all this chaos and sadness, and everybody's different with the emotion that kind of crops up on them, but I find that erratic emotional flare-ups is a big theme now too with everybody. It's a lot.
I think you too might be picking up on the collective energies, and I like what Lee Harris says. I release any energy and emotion that is not mine. I've always liked that saying.
That is, yes. Yeah. That's really important, I think. And grounding.
Yeah.
Out and just sticking your feet in the dirt.
Yes. It's like, that's one of the most simple and effective things that we can do. It's sometimes people will ask that in session, and I'm like, I know this sounds so like, it's not fancy, but it actually really works. Go put your bare feet on the ground.
Even in the snow. Yeah. I mean, it's important, I think, to do that as much as you can.
And it's interesting, while we're all talking too, I was thinking, with all of these changes that we're seeing, I do think there's an increase in empath ability too, which would make sense, like you were saying, Kim, with the erratic emotions, because we are empathing so many other energies besides our own, which is where, like Laurie was saying, that disconnect piece is very helpful to help us remember it's not necessarily our emotion. It could just be something in the air that we're just picking up on intuitively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
I've heard a lot too about just being a lighthouse for people that are struggling, just being, in being calm, staying in your space, in your presence, knowing who you are, and helping other people just by being yourself, just by giving love and being the lighthouse to help other people say, look, maybe there is some hope, or maybe it isn't so bad. I can do this.
Yes.
Love that.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes we just need to be witnessed if we're moving through emotions like that, right? So to be that lighthouse, like you said, and not necessarily need to fix it, but to just be present makes a big difference.
Yeah. And I experienced that. So me and my husband had a fight, and I was very angry, like you were saying, Kim, this energy of anger. And, me giving all my wisdom to him was not being helpful at all. And I realized partway through it, I was like, you know what? This is what it is. It's not like nobody's hurt. This isn't like, he's not cheating on me. He's not, hurting me. And is this what I want to focus on? And so I just, as he's talking, I'm just sitting there going, okay, I'm going to breathe in, calm, exhale, peace, breathe in, calm, exhale, peace. And when I did my part of it, when I switched my focus to what I wanted, which was calm and peace, suddenly the whole energy changed. And now both of us were calm and peaceful without me having to try and fix him or get him into that energy. I just did it myself, and it shifted the whole thing. So, it's also becoming aware of, is this what I want to be feeling and thinking right now? And what is it? And how do I get there myself? So when I changed it inside myself, it kind of just changed the whole room.
Yeah. That's great. I've practiced that a bit too, and it's amazing how it works. It kind of blows you away sometimes. It's like, wow, why didn't I do that a long time ago?
Well, I think it goes with what Laurie said about the lighthouse. Like the lighthouse is about standing still and doing your work and shining your light, and not going out and with like the flashlight and trying to find the people to shine your light on, right? Like you just stand and shine your light. So it wasn't about me focusing on him and changing him. It was about me focusing and changing my energy. And I think that goes with what Laurie said about just being the lighthouse and standing still and going within instead of trying to fix everything outside. So do you have any upcoming workshops and also how, if people would like to work with you further, how they might go about that?
So I don't have any in the immediate future, but I do have, as far as like the community component, there will be a midsummer observance I do on June 21st. But I also have self-led tarot workshops, which you can find on my Etsy shop, which is Icy's Owl Moon. And I do post 2 to 3 videos a week on my YouTube channel, which is Owl Moon 513. And I talk about a lot of what we discussed today, and a lot of that, the channel work there is rooted in alternative forms of spirituality and the structure of tarot, basically walking with tarot in your life. So you can find me in those 2 arenas. And when I advertise for my Sabbath gatherings, that will always be on my Etsy shop. And I always post a video on my YouTube channel. So if you're looking to connect that way, those options are always available. And I do still offer one-on-one sessions. That is also available through my Etsy shop right now. So that's where you can find me. And like I said, I usually post 2 to 3 videos a week. So there's always something to chat about in this path, which is pretty exciting.
That's wonderful. And we will have all of her links down below so you can easily get a hold of her if you're looking for. Is there any last wisdom or messaging that you would like?
Oh, that's such a good question, Laurie. Okay, hold on. Let me see. I think anchoring into compassion and presence for ourselves is really important right now. We've talked a lot about that self-love and lighthouse component today. And I think, It's something that we're all really being encouraged to deepen into, less of fear and control and more of that presence and understanding for ourselves, which then, as you were saying, Laurie, reverberates out to the people around us in the way that we'd really desire for it to. So I think more than ever, that presence is very necessary at this time.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Well, thank you
Thank
so
you,
much for
Raecine.
joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes.
Thank you, Raecine. This was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you, Raecine.
Thank you.
So if you've liked this podcast as much as we have, please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, how is your intuition leading you to the next perfect step?